right, good morning, everyone. This is Dan from True Peak Audio coming back with you for a walkthrough of the mix I did yesterday in the live mix session. Want to apologize. Sorry, we had an issue with the recording of the mix session, so that's not going to be available unless you watched it live. That's the whole point. Anyways, so because we weren't able to record it, I figured I'd come back and do a walkthrough of the mix. This is it right here. First, I'll give you a walkthrough of the routing and how I set up this session, and then we will dive into the mix. All right, so importing the audio files. So whenever I'm downloading files, either from a client or from, a service like Cambridge Multitracks, or this one came from, you get the zip folder in your downloads folder. So what I do is I extract that and then I cut it out of the downloads folder. I create my session, and then I come down into the session file, into the session folder, audio files, and then I paste that folder into the audio files folder. So now it's in the folder for the session. It's all organized. There's only one copy of it, which I like, and then I hit Command Shift or Control Shift on PC, hit the I key, and brings your import audio window up, and then we just go to the session, audio files folder, into the folder, grab all my audio files like so. Oops, caps lock instead of shift. There we go. Shift all my audio files, hit add files, and what this does is it links your audio files to your session file. Okay, the Pro Tools session file is really just a map of where everything is on your computer. So really all I'm doing is I'm telling it to look in the audio files folder for the session. If you hit this button, copy files over here, then that will take the audio files from wherever they are on your computer, and it'll make a copy of those files in the audio files folder for Pro Tools. So really it's accomplishing the same thing, except the fact that you now have two copies of those audio files. So you could just go back and delete the originals, but this is the workflow that I use. Okay, so then when you hit done, it'll link all the audio files, and then it'll give you a dialog, and it'll say, do you want this in new track or clip list? And I always say new track, because then it creates every single audio track, and they're already named the exact same as the file. Okay, so your file name is your track name, and that just makes things really easy. So that way you don't have to go through and name all your tracks if you have like 50 or 100 tracks. If you hit clip list, they will show up over here in your Pro Tools clip list. They show up here regardless when you import them onto a track anyways, but let's say I've edited one of these tracks and I want to go back to the original, I can just grab it from the clip list and pull it back in. You don't have to re-import your audio files. Okay, so I don't use clip list very often, so I just keep it hidden, like so. Gives me a bit more screen real estate to work with. Great, so then once I have all my audio files in the session, the next thing I do is I do Option Shift or Alt Shift on PC, I for import, and that brings up the import session data. So now I can go into any other Pro Tools session and I can import from that session into this session. So I have this basically mixing template session set up. It's not a template file, it's just a Pro Tools session where I've created the tracks I want, I've set up the routing the way I want it, I've put some plugins on some of the tracks that I always use, and I have that. So now I can just select all these buses, my master section, and my VCAs that are grouped and linked to my buses, right? So you have my master section here, my submaster, my print track, and my master fader. And then if I was importing from an actual other session, like let's say I'd done another song from this band and I wanted to import some of those plugins, then I could go here and I could say, no, don't bring the alternate playlists, don't bring the clips. I would deselect anything that I want or anything that I don't want, and I would leave selected what I do want. So stuff like track colors, track active state, sidechain assignments, input assignments, any hardware inserts, plugin assignments and settings and all that stuff, right? So I can import that directly from a different session, and that would give me a starting place if I had already done a song for this band. But this is just my sort of effects section, my reverbs, delays, my master section, and my VCAs for automation. So I just import that into the session. Those show up after the last selected track. You can see them here. Here are my VCAs, my basic VCAs, my master fader, my submaster, and then this print track, I just rename it in every session to the name of the band Okay, yeah, that's not a typo. It does say ShortWave. For a second, I thought it said ShortWave. Anyways, I just name it to the band and the song. Okay, and I use an underscore. That's something that I always use to separate. Okay, so let's dive into this session. You can see I have my input track monitored, so you're going to be listening to the session and not the print that I did at the end of the session. So once I've got all the routing and my subs set up, then I get to mixing. All right, and then so the first thing I do is I go into my mix window and I take all the faders in the session. I literally just hit the all group and I drag them all down to -12. You can see these faders are still there. Other faders get moved around as needed. Some can get dragged down. You know, like my vocal sub is now at -14 versus, you know, let's see what else is higher. My bass is much higher, is at 5.3. And like, right, so like individual tracks are higher. So, but they all start at -12, every single fader. And then I go back and I put my submaster, my print track, and my master fader back to 0, and the VCAs stay at 0 as well, because they're for automation. I want to keep them at unity because that's the spot where they're most sensitive, so small movements will have a bigger effect than if they were down at -12 like these guys. Yeah, so then once everything's at -12, that's when I start listening to the song. And as the song plays, I just go through and I create these markers for different sections, because that lets me do really quick time selections. Like, you know, if I want the intro to the verse, if I only want to do the intro, then I can make that time selection super quick. Same thing if I want, say, that pre-chorus to the next verse. There you go. That's all it is. So marker windows here. It's Command 5 on the numpad to bring it up or hide it if you wanted to know that. And let's say, so I want that pre-chorus to verse 2. So I would do, so pre-chorus is number 3. So on the numpad, you do 0.3 point. That selects that one. Then you hold shift and you go to your next one, which is going to be 5. So you're holding shift and you go 0.5 point, and that makes your selection. And then I also put an end marker in as well over here, and that's when all the audio is done playing. Okay, so once everything is out, that's where my end marker goes. And then when I go to print, I just select my intro marker, my end shift and hold to my end marker, and now I have my time selection so that I can do my print and not have to worry about forgetting to stop the print at some point. It just stops automatically, which is great. Yeah, so that's my session setup. And then let's dive into what I did to mix the song. So let's have a listen through of the song, and then I'll talk about what I did. Here we go.
I don't care anymore what you want me to do. I don't care anymore what you tried to put me through. To leave was easy, stay away was even more. I don't care what you gave me, I just don't care anymore. And I just feel like letting go. I thought that I should let you know I don't care. I don't care. I don't care anymore. It was trite and I forgot. I don't care anymore. If you return what I bought you, it wasn't easy. That part just wasn't true. I don't care what you gave me, I just don't care we got through. I just feel like letting go. Thought that I should let you know I don't care.
Cool. All right, so that's the song. Let's go through and see what I did. Let's start with the drums. Generally in my mixing, I start with the kick snare. I'll put up the overheads. I'll get my drum, like my basic drum sound together, and then I'll move on to the bass, and then I'll move on to the lead vocals, and then I'll start filling everything else in. Basically, the idea is that I'm taking care of the stuff that is difficult to punch through a mix, stuff that people always have trouble with. You see so many people, especially online, going, I can't get my vocals to sit in the mix. Well, it's because you made your instrumental parts and you mastered them sometimes. It's not really mastering, but, people will make their whole instrumental, make everything super loud, they'll compress the shit out of it, and then they'll go, I can't make my vocals sit. Well, it's because you didn't bring your vocals in early enough. So, same thing with kick and snare. People have so much trouble getting it to cut through. They just keep fighting against it, but it's because there's too much other stuff in the way already when they're trying to mix it. So I do it first. So I go kick snare, bring up the overheads, get my basic drum sound, then the bass, then the main vocals, and that gives me enough space to put the vocals in and have them sit in the mix, and then I can bring all the other stuff around the vocals. So let's just listen to the drum sound here. Let's just do yeah, that's a good spot. That has everything in it. So that's got the whole drum set is in here. And then we have these 4 sets of claps as well. So, kick, it's pretty simple. I usually like knees on drums most of the time. There are some exceptions. Most of the time I like this. So generally first I will drive it a little bit harder just to get a bit more of that sound. I ended up going with a 45 hertz high pass filter, boost at 60, little cut at 300, and a little bit of a boost at 10K. Normally these boosts I would split between a kick in and a kick out. So the kick in would be more of that sort of mid-range clicky sound rather than the body in the air of a kick. And then the kick out would be more of that like smiley face curve. And then they would probably both get a cut around 300 to 400 hertz, just to get rid of that boxiness. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did with this plugin. And then I'm not a huge fan of the Neve compression a lot of the time, so I've stopped using it. I tried it for a long time, just couldn't get it to work for me. So I recently got this plugin, the Blue Ash SC5 from Black Rooster Audio. Great plugin. And I just compressed the shit, not really that much by the meter. Just tickling that yellow, that first one, occasionally going up into -3 gain reduction. So yeah, not a ton of actual compression. I just increased the gain until I heard what I liked, brought the output down to sort of match it where it was, played with the attack and release a little. And that was about it. And you'll also notice that the limit button is in. It's just in by default. I like it. It sounds good. Low-end elements can really be compressed a lot harder than some other stuff in like the mid-range. And it kind of needs it because otherwise it'll just get drowned out. Your ear is much more sensitive to mid-range sounds than low-end sounds. Yeah, so that's the kick. I'll play just the kick for you. All right, doesn't sound that great on its own, but when you add the whole kit in, the whole drum kit, it sounds better. And then when you add the whole song in,
I don't care what you gave me, I just don't.
It's just poking out nicely. It sits nicely in the mix, but it doesn't sound that great on its own now that I listen to it on its own. And I do a lot of this mixing in context. I'm not like soloing just the kick for most of this mixing. I'm listening to the whole song and I'm saying, this is what I don't hear in my kick when I'm listening to the whole song. Mixing in context is super, super, super important. Yeah, so that's my kick sound. And then let's go to the snare. Let's bring the snare in. I use the same Lindell channel, Lindell 80 series, Neve, same idea, bit of saturation, a little bit of a boost on the low end, cut at 70. 160 was a bit too much. little cut in the lower mids for boxiness, and that was it. I didn't want to add any extra air to this one because it didn't feel like it really needed it. And then grab the old 1176, going with the bluey for this song, just a bit more of an aggressive style. I find this one has a bit more saturation and harmonics included in it. Yeah, so this is the compressor I used, and then something must have been bugging me at some point because I came back and made a bit of a dip at 1K here. I didn't like that. Doesn't sound bad. That's what it sounded like before. Just a bit of enhancement, a little more body, a little less ring. With the whole kit. And with the whole song.
And I forgot, I don't care anymore. If you return what I...
Nice and vibey, nice and groovy. Didn't even touch the snare down mic. It is in there. Almost the same level as the snare up. But, you know, just didn't feel like it needed anything. It was giving me exactly what I wanted just from bringing the fader up. So I left it at that. Hi-hat's nice and low, panned off slightly. When you think about a drum kit, right? The snare and the kick are usually in the center of your stereo image, right? And then your hi-hat is just a little bit off to the side. And then so the toms, what I did is I listened to the overheads, just soloed them, listened to a tom fill, and tried to place them in the exact same spot. And that's just sort of where they ended up. And then tambourine, I just slapped it off to the left because it's not really part of the kit. Just seemed like a good spot for it. And then the claps I just spread out in the stereo image and just balanced everything against each other. So toms, I didn't like the sound of the tom that they did, so I mixed in a sample to augment it, give it a little more body. It just felt weak and more like a reggae tom than a punk rock tom, so I did that. I like it better that way. And then I have this SSL channel strip, the SSL native channel strip. Drive the input into clipping. Yeah, that's right. I clipped the input stage of my analog modeled plugins. Sue me. That's what people do on real SSLs. That's what this is modeled after. That's what it's emulating. So if that's how people use real SSLs, there's no reason that you can't use the plugin the exact same way. If it sounds good, then it's good. That's the only real unassailable rule in mixing. If it sounds good, it is good. That's it. Same on the floor tom. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of saturation, slamming it in like 6 to 10 dB in the compressor. Let's grab a tom fill so you can hear that. So that's what they sounded like originally. Here's the plugins. Yeah. And then these claps, I just threw them all through an 1176, cranked up the gain because they were super, super low in the mix. You couldn't hear them at all. So let's just grab these tracks, and I'm just going to bypass the plugins. So here. So that's without any compression. There's no way that's going to cut through the mix.
Anymore. If you return what I bought.
So.
I don't care what you gave me. I just don't care, we are through.
And I didn't go in and try to time these onto the snare exactly because part of it is looking for that like sloppiness of the claps. That's part of how they come out, and it's kind of what gives the vibe for this song. And remember, this is kind of like a pop punk song, so a little bit of sloppiness is okay. It's part of the genre. And then the claps also got sent to this reverb on bus 7/8, which I'll get to in a bit when we talk about my reverbs. Yeah, and then on the bus, API 2500, one of my favorite bus compressors.
Stay away was
Just
even
subtly
more.
bringing that to
I don't care what
go to
you
loud section. Mostly that kick. Just very subtly gluing the whole thing together, and then it's all running through a Fairchild slight boost at 100, a little bit more of a boost at 10K with a fairly wide bandwidth. Just give it that little bit of extra air. So let's take those off. Let's see what they sound like.
I don't care anymore. It was trite and I
Just
forgot.
compressor.
I don't care anymore. If you return what I bought you.
Just a little livelier. And then through the Fairchild. There's not the Fairchild, the Pultec. Just a little beef. Some nice saturation from the tubes. Right, so now the EQ is out. So this is just running through the hardware, but not with the EQ circuits engaged. See, there's a subtle difference just having it on the insert. Cool. And yeah, that's my drums. I didn't even send the drum bus to reverbs like I normally do. Just wasn't feeling it. I just wanted them to be, you know, kind of dry, kind of punchy. And they, like, the snare already has enough like ring and room sound in it that I didn't really feel like I needed to throw it into a reverb. So there we go. You know, just follow your ears. Toucan Sam follows his nose. Toucan Dan follows his ears, I guess. Bass. Let's listen to the bass. So no plugins. This is obviously an amp track. Let's get a louder section in here. So there's already quite a bit of distortion on this, especially on those low notes. Right, so first EQ, teeny tiny little high pass just to clean up some of the really like subby, rumbly stuff. You can see the fundamentals are actually sitting around, that's going down to about 45, 50-ish is where the lowest fundamental is actually sitting. So you really don't need all this stuff down here. That's just jangly stuff. So just a gentle high pass helps tighten that up. And then we have a dip at about 360. Again, just that like sort of boxy, gross area. Yeah, doesn't sound good. So I got rid of it a little bit and it helped tighten it up. Just a little clearer. And then we have the Summit Grand Channel, which you'll see in a couple spots on this mix. Doing some compression. Listening to this later on monitors, I was sort of thinking I could have driven this a bit harder. I'm not going to change it because that's how I did it in the live mix session. You know, if I had more time, I probably would have come back and done more compression here. But this is a optical compressor, very similar to an LA2A, but you get a slow and a fast attack setting, a fast and a slow release setting, so I went with slow and fast. And the compressor, despite it being under the EQ, is actually first in the signal chain in this plugin. I don't know why they did it like that, but that's how they did it. And then, so on the EQ side, we have another high pass filter at 47 again, just to take care of that rumble nice and gently. We have a shelf boost at 100. We have a slight boost at 680. That's just like the nose. So that's without the boost at 680. And that's with. And that's just to help it cut through the mix a little bit. So let's hear it in the mix.
I don't care anymore.
Gives it a little bit of presence in the mix. Yeah, no, we'll just unbypass that. We'll talk about this in a bit. Because when I mixed the bass originally, that wasn't there. And you'll notice that it's on the exact same insert of the entire mix, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Right, so let's continue on to the guitars. Summon at the end of the mix, session was very nice to say the guitar sounds good. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But at the same time, like, this is what the guitars sound like with no plugins. They already sound good, right? When your guitars already sound good, what do you need to do? Right? Already got good guitar tones.
I just feel like
This is mostly just balance.
Thought that I should let you know.
Right? So we have a lot of double tracks. We have a lot of parts. We have a lot of double tracks. We have a lot of layers to this song for the guitar parts. There's a lot of different things going on here, which is great. Gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of choice in what you're going to do. So most of this is just high pass filtering, right? That's all this is. Most of this guitar sound is just high pass filtering, getting rid of a little bit of the chugginess underneath, just to clean up the guitar sound a little bit. And then there are a couple tracks where I did a little bit more, like these two guys right here. Let's listen to that. This is a nice little melodic line that comes up every once in a while. And I just wanted to give it a little bit more space in the mix, so it went to one of my reverbs. We'll talk about that when we get down to the bottom of the mix. Yeah, but basically just high pass filter. Not much else. And then, yeah, down here, we're getting into some other cool stuff down here. So I don't think that guy really got anything, but this one did. These two got Renaissance AXX. This is my favorite guitar compressor, at least for electric guitars, maybe not so much for acoustics. And these are on the solo. Cool. And then just put a little Sans amp on the left side, just to give it a little more drive, a little more crunch. Didn't do a lot with this one. It's mostly the default setting. Just gave it a little drive, gave it a bunch of crunch. And that just gave it a little more attitude, because before this, it was just kind of feeling a little tame. Here, I'll bypass it. Right? It's still good. But it just felt tame. So I just added a little bit of Sans amp. And now it has a bit more attitude. Let's hear that mix. And then this is going to same reverb as this guy up here. And it's also going to my spread delay. Talk about that when we get there. I know I'm going to say that a lot, but I don't want to go over it 100 times. I'm just going to go over it once. Great. And then the whole bus got this LA2A for just some glue, just some compression between the parts, just so that they react together when things come in and out.
Thought that I should let you know.
A little bit of body.
I don't care.
LA2As sound great on just about anything you put them on. Maybe drums is about the only thing I wouldn't put them on, but wouldn't rule it out either. I'm sure there's a situation where it'll sound good. All right, main vocals. Bit more involved here. You'll notice that most of the session was, you know, just one plugin, maybe two for most of this. Discounting the radiator right now. I'll tell you about that once I'm through explaining all the individual tracks. Right, so just a little bit of tuning. Some of the stuff wasn't quite sitting well with me, so I just ran it through Waves Tune real time. Mostly on default setting. I think I just sped up the note transition a little bit, because I think that's what was bugging me. Just a little too much slide between the notes for the style.
I don't care anymore what you want me to do. I don't care anymore.
Right, the tune's fine.
You tried to put me through.
Oops. And then let's hear it with tuning.
I don't care anymore what you want me to do. I don't care anymore what you tried to put me through.
It just solidifies them a little bit for me. Maybe it's placebo even. Who knows?
I don't care anymore what you want me to do. I don't care anymore.
Just watch how
Tried
much
to
I'm doing.
put
She's not
me
even doing very
through.
much.
Till it was easy, stay away was even more.
So, all right. And then high pass filter, just clean up some of the junk
I don't care anymore.
So just all this little
You
rumble,
want me to
resonant
do.
stuff. So just
I don't care
filter that out,
anymore.
but don't really touch the actual body.
Tried to put me through.
Then we have Barrier. This is by Kit Plugins. It's just like a saturation tool. Initially, I had this a bit higher, and then I brought the 1176 in, and then I didn't like this being that high anymore. Then it got too nosy, too nasally, and I didn't like it. So here it is in.
I don't care anymore what you want me to
Out.
do. I don't care anymore.
So it's not doing much anymore.
You tried to put me through. Till it was easy.
But that's part of my style. It's just building up a little bit of saturation and multiple steps along the mix rather than doing it all at once and having, just one plugin reacting to all the changing levels, just doing a little bit at a time over and over and over again through different stages. So then we come into my 1176, and this is set up with the fastest attack, fastest release. I'm just trying to catch a little bit of the highest peaks on this one. I'm not trying to really compress the vocal with this.
I don't care anymore what you want me to do. I don't care anymore
Just a tiny bit.
what you tried to put me through. Till it was easy.
Okay, so now we're going to come up to the Summit Grand channel again. Here we go.
I don't care anymore.
So a little bit more compression here. So now we have two stages of compression, and these are adding together. But it's still not that much. Sort of medium attack, medium release. Didn't really change the settings there. And then let's see. Didn't boost the lows. Looks like I cut a little bit at 560. Sorry, my eyes suck. I have terrible eyes, and it's hard to read these small fonts sometimes. It looks like 560 I took out. That's generally a frequency in male vocals that I just don't like. And then I boosted a little bit at the top to give it some air, and that's it. Not making major changes to the sound. Also have a high pass at 82 here. Not making major changes to the sound because it already sounds pretty good. I'm just polishing it. I'm just making it sound as good as it can sound. Okay. And then those all got copied down to this lead vocal double track because it's the same vocal. It's the same person. He's just reinforcing certain words in the song. So pretty much the exact same. And then on the bus, because there's two vocals, I wouldn't do this if there was only one vocal, but if there's two vocals or more, we come into Fairchild 670 compressor. Great compressor. This is a Verimu compressor, unlike the FET and optical that we had before. So I gave it a little bit more input, pulled the threshold down a little bit. I used time constant 6 for vocal compression. And basically that's just because it has a bit more of a variable release rather than a fixed release, and I like that sound a bit better. If I was doing drums or guitars, bass, I would use 1 or 2 because those are generally faster. But 6 is good for vocals. That's what I like. So I'll just bypass my bus compression, and we'll hear what that sounds like.
I don't care anymore.
Let's get a spot where we have both of them.
I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, just holds them, sits in the mix a little bit better. And then we have our Pultec doing nothing. It's just sitting there. Let's listen to this. Let's go over here.
I just feel like letting go. Thought that I should let you know.
And it's
I
in.
don't care. I just feel like letting go. Thought that I should let you know.
There's just something about running signal through a Pultec EQ that I really, 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 really like. It just fattens things up in a very nice way. It's just that tube saturation. And then we're going to several reverbs and delays here. Okay, we'll talk about that when we talk about reverbs. So background vocals, even less going on here, because they're going to sit fairly back in the mix. You're not going to hear them that well. They do pop out at certain spots, but they sound fine. So nothing on the first couple tracks. They just didn't need it. This over here sounded out of tune. It was bugging.
Feel like letting go.
So you can see how much I'm doing this time.
Thought that I should let you.
Right, so I just felt that needed to be a little more in tune, so I just slapped some waves tune on it, and that fixed it up. That pulled it in closer to a spot that it was tolerable. Next set of backing tracks, these guys right here. Nothing going on there. Didn't need it. And then just this last set of oohs down here was getting a bit muddy with everything going on.
I just feel like letting go. Thought that I should let you know.
So there's just something resonant in there that I didn't like, and I just filtered it out. That's all I did. It's literally all I did on all of these, just filters. And I went through individually and set the filter because they were all singing different notes, right? There we go. That's my BG vocals. And then on the bus, they go to reverbs and delays. Okay. That's basically the mix. Then you'll see Radiator on every single individual track. And most of these are just sitting on the default setting. I think there's a couple guitar parts where I may have like pushed up the input a little bit just to get a bit more of the saturation, the sound of this. But basically all that's going on is I'm adding some saturation because before, yeah, there we go, just Radiator. So now Radiator is bypassed on all my tracks. Before it was just sounding a little too clean, a little too polished, a little too pop, and not enough punk. So here you go. Here's without Radiator.
I don't care. I don't care. I don't care.
Just a little cleaner. I just wanted it to have just a little bit more grit, a little bit more edge. So with Radiator on all the tracks, and I had to individually go through and change all of them from noisy, where it opens up, to clean. Really annoying, but had to do it. It was worth it. So now with Radiator,
I don't care. I don't care.
right? That meter totally pings.
I don't care.
But it sounds good. I don't care that it's not hitting at minus 18 dBFS. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. Don't worry about it. You want to get the character of this piece of gear, you got to drive it hard. That's how they do it. That's how they get the sound. If you put everything at a polite minus 18, you're not going to get any of the character of the gear. You're not going to get any of the sound of the plugin. It's just going to pass through in to out. Nothing's going to change.
I don't care.
Right?
I don't care.
Doesn't sound bad. Without.
I don't care. I just feel like.
Right? So just let it. Oh, hello. Why didn't you unbypass? Unbypass. Oh, because I have just the background vocals selected. That's why. All right, let's make sure that it's. Great. Okay, so yeah, so now it's everywhere. Let's look at the main vocal one.
I don't care.
Totally ends.
I don't care.
You can especially hear how the guitars just have a little bit more grit and body to them and just a little more attitude. Okay. Reverbs and delays. I have 4 groups of reverbs over 7 tracks here. So you have reverb 1 is just a single reverb, mostly just for vocals. It's from the CLA Echosphere plate, which I'm pretty sure is emulating an EMT plate. It sounds good. I like it. It also has a very handy pre-delay feature that the plate I was using before didn't have. I was using Soundtoy's little plate that doesn't have the pre-delay feature on it, so you can see no pre-delay. So I just changed it out as a utility to make it a little bit easier for mixing vocals. So that's my vocal reverb, just the plate. This plugin also has a slap delay built in, but I take that completely out. I don't want that. I have a different slap delay setup that I'll get to in a minute. Reverb 2 over here is these two. They're on the same bus. They get the same input. And yeah, that's a combination. This is mostly for instruments except for drums. So when I want all my guitars, electric and acoustic and keyboards and stuff to have a common reverb, this is where they go. And they come in here and they hit Reverb, which is doing room, and they hit Abbey Road Chambers, which is on the tile chamber setting. Then Reverb 3, this is my drum reverb, my drum and snare reverb. This is hitting a small room on the first side, and then it's hitting little plate on the second side at about 2 seconds. And again, they share a bus 5-6. That's my drum reverb. Drums go here. A little bit of other stuff can end up in here sometimes. Sometimes I like using this as just a snare reverb, and I'll put the drums in the other one. Just depends on the song. Depends what I'm listening to. Reverb 4, this is meant to be a big special reverb. We have microshift on 2, and microshift is really interesting. It's not exactly a pitch shift. It's not exactly a reverb. It's a really interesting plugin. And then we have microshift on 3 as well, and it just creates a big spacey vibe. And then I went even spacier with Supermassive, and I think I just found a preset that I kind of liked, and I put it on there, and it helps, and it sounds really cool. And then delays, we have our classic slap delay set to time so that it doesn't default to the 120 beats per minute that Pro Tools defaults to. Quarter note delay. If I was going to use this, I didn't use this in this mix. I didn't find a use for it. I would take the time to set the tempo in the session and let this sync up, because that's the easiest way to get a quarter note delay. Delay 3. So this is my spread delay that I mentioned before. It's about 15 milliseconds apart on each side. And yeah, that just spreads things out a little bit. I use this in combination with the slap delay all the time. A lot of instruments end up in this, vocals end up in this, background vocals end up in this. And then delay 4, this is my crowd delay, and this is just to give a sense of lots of little ambient reflections. Okay, and then we're not done with this yet. If we look in our mix window, we'll be able to see it a lot clearer. These are also routing back to my reverbs. So especially my slap delay gets routed back to my vocal reverb. And so if I've put anything else in here, like an electric guitar solo or something, that also hits my plate for vocal reverb. My spread delay, over here is going to my vocal reverb as well as my big room reverb. And it just helps give a sense of depth. And then as I mix things into these buses, and then the buses mix back into the other effects buses, everything starts to share a really common 3D space as they mix together and create all these interesting reflections. If you don't send your delays, especially your vocal delays, back to a reverb, they can sound really dry and stick out of a mix really awkwardly. So it's definitely something you consider if you haven't done this before. Definitely give that a try. It's not as critical with something like a guitar, because you might not be using a delay on a guitar to create a natural effect. You might be doing it for the groove, and it's actually part of the melody and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily need to do this, but it's definitely something to consider if that's something that you haven't tried before. And then I've also tried sending my Reverb 4 back to this crowd delay, I believe. Yeah, 15, 16. So that's back to the crowd delay. Doesn't always work, but I keep it there just in case it does. And that's my reverb and delay section. So now we'll come up to the mix bus, and let's just see what's going on here. Let's just bypass all of this. Let's find a good section. Let's listen to the last chorus to the end. Yeah. Right.
I don't care.
So this is without. This is with.
I don't care.
first up, we have Magnetite. This is Black Rooster audio again. Tape emulation. I went with the red. They have 3 different types of tape here, and they all have sort of different biases and different frequency balances. So you can try the red, the blue, and the black. The red is the default. It's the most neutral. I went with it for this one. Let's just listen to it.
I don't care. I don't care.
Just a little bit more saturation. Again, like I said, building it up in small stages throughout the mix rather than doing it all in one spot. Sounds better that way to me. So what's great about this plugin is if you right-click on this input knob, your recording level, if you right-click on that and move it around, then the playback level over here will adjust in the opposite direction, so you keep unity gain in and out, which is really nice. And then you have meters here where I'm metering the input, metering the output.
I don't
Pretty much the same. Input might be slightly higher.
I don't care.
But they're pretty close to the same. So that's a great plugin. You can also change the tape speed, change the bias, which changes the frequency balance. Yeah, it's tape compression. You guys have seen that before. It's tape saturation. Now we come back to the API 2500 again. Like I said, one of my favorite bus compressors. Here it is.
I don't care. I don't care.
Just keeping everything together.
I don't care.
Really not going into dB compression.
I just feel like letting go. Then I should let you know.
Okay. And then last but not least, our Pultec again. Again, doing nothing. Occasionally I'll do like I did on the drums and give a tiny boost at 100 and a little bit at like 10 or 12K, depending on what I'm hearing. Didn't hear the need for it in this song, but so I just wanted to pass signal through it again.
I don't care.
Bypass.
I don't care.
Subtle difference, but it makes a big difference. So like none of these plugins on my master bus are doing a lot, but when you listen to them all together and then you bypass them, which I'll do for you in a second, it makes a big difference. So like here's it with it on.
I don't care.
And now you bypass it.
I don't care.
Back on.
I don't care. I just feel like letting go.
So everything just sort of falls back into the mix a little bit. It just brings them out nicely. And now we come down to our VCAs. So these VCA faders, the way they work in Pro Tools is that they control a group. So you have to, when you create a VCA, you have to assign it to a group. You can assign it to any group you want. So I could assign it to control a couple of my reverb faders, any of these buses that I have in groups. I have a drum group, so I can control the individual drum tracks as a group with this one fader, which is really nice. Check out Wayne's Knowledge Nugget on VCAs, and there will be an article, like a blog article on them coming soon as well. But anyways, I use them just to control the subs. So my drums VCA controls just my drum sub. So you can see the trim, the auto. See? You can see how it's controlling. You can see the bright blue line is the fader of the sub, and then the little overlaid, grayed out sort of blue is the VCA automation controlling it. And so all I did is let me turn off my subgroup here, right? Is I selected just this fader, created a group, called it drum VCA, and there you go. That's how you control one fader with the VCA. And pretty much in Pro Tools, that gets around the issue of not having a trim automation layer. Regular Pro Tools, what they used to call Pro Tools native, doesn't have a trim layer. It just has the one volume line for automation. And so if you use that to automate your sub, you lose the ability to just push and pull your fader up and down because it'll just follow the automation. So then you have to select all of the automation and drag them down together, and it's really annoying. So I use VCAs to get around that. If you're on Pro Tools Ultimate, what they used to call Pro Tools HD or HDX, you would have an extra like trim layer of automation, so you could just automate the trim level, and then you would still have your normal fader to balance your mix. Yeah, so I do that for all my subgroups. When I come down here, you'll see I have a keys VCA. That's just part of my template that I talked about earlier. Don't have a keys group in this song, so it didn't get used. I should probably hide it. Hide and make inactive. There we go. So you can see just throughout the whole song, I'm automating as I go. And so like for vocals, I'm pushing up the ends of phrases, keeping them, just a little more audible. A couple spots I'm pulling it down where he gets really loud suddenly. And this is sort of like compression. Some people will say the best compression is fader automation. And it's not quite the same, but it sounds good. And then at the end of the song, I just drag it all the way down to make sure there's nothing extra going on. And yeah, so drums get a push, mostly for fills or changes in sections, just to lead into the next thing. Bass, just sort of following the line, making sure it's audible the whole time. Guitars, pretty much whenever a new guitar part would come in, I would push it a little bit. And then sometimes I would pull it down if there was something else going on in the song that I wanted to hear better. Just pull the guitars out of the way a little bit. It just helps clear things up. So like this is what I mean about when new guitars come in. So right off the top, we just have this pair of tracks right here. And then we get this track coming in. So I gave a little push there. Then we get these 4, 5, 6 tracks coming in. They each get a little push. This guy gets a little push just to pull your ear towards the guitar. And kind of the same thing for the background vocals. They would get the same automation as the main vocals, just pulling them out a little bit. Yeah, so let's disable this automation so you can hear the difference. So you've been hearing it with the automation on so far. So with the automation off, let's just go into this section. Let's listen to this.
I don't care anymore. It was trite and I forgot. I don't care anymore. If you return what I bought you, it wasn't easy. That part just wasn't true. I don't care what you gave me. I just don't care we are through. I just feel like letting go.
So automation's on right now.
Thought that I should let
Off
you
again.
know. I don't care.
Back
I
to
don't
the-
care anymore. It was trite and I forgot.
So yeah, just makes the song a little bit more lively, a little bit more 3D when stuff moves in and out. It sounds more like musicians playing together than a bunch of recorded tracks. Just gives it that little more organic feel, a little more 3D, a little bit of emotion into the phrases. So I really like that. And then once I'm done a mix, I print it on my print track here. This is an audio track, not an aux. That's why I've had it input monitored, and then you just record it. You just make your time selection like I mentioned earlier, and then you hit record, let it play through. There you go. The reason I do this isn't really necessary if you're just mixing for yourself, unless you want to make different mixes of the same song. But when you're mixing for clients, you'll do a mix, and then I would print it, have it here, and then I would bounce the print and send it to the client. Bouncing just helps me get rid of this little bullshit that Pro Tools adds on to the end of the file names to keep the clips organized. So then they would listen to it, and then they'll send me revision notes. And then when I get those revision notes, I'll pull this up, and then I'll make another playlist. Just go playlist, I don't care, _ rev 1, right? And now I'd make a new print for revision 1 and send that off to the client. And then if they say, oh no, I like the other version better, oh well, no problem, I'll just go back to this. Done. Right? So that way I can keep my revisions organized within the same session really nicely. I can go back and compare between revisions. If they say, oh, I like this in revision 1, but can you change this other thing back to what it was like in the original version, then I can come back to that original version and I can listen to it and compare. It's also a really good way to bring reference mixes into a session. You can just import the audio file for the reference that you have, like for this, maybe Matchbox 20, Simple Plan, something like that, something pop punk from the early 2000s. And I drop that in on this track. And then while I'm input monitoring, I'm listening to my mix. If I turn this off, now you're listening to the audio on the track, so you can compare to your reference quite easily. And to volume match, you just pull the clip gain down. There you go. That's referencing in Pro Tools, at least the way I do it. Don't need to buy a fancy plugin. You just need to use your audio routing capabilities that are built into your DAW. And there you go, guys. That's my mix of shortwave RadioBand. Like I said at the beginning of this, if I was mixing it on monitors, I probably would have punched up the bass a little bit. When I listened to it after the stream, it sounded a little thin to me, so I probably would have pushed the bass guitar up a little bit in the mix. But that's pretty much the only change I would make. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was useful to you. Sorry we didn't record the stream yesterday, but if you missed it, there you go. That's what I did. That's my method. That's how I think about mixing. I'll catch you guys next time. I'm Dan from True Peak Audio. Catch you later.